More than 100 top academics and physicians from around the world have distilled information on concussion in athletes. The updated recommendations aim to improve the care of sports people at all levels, that is, of course, of competition. To discuss the guidelines, I'm joined by Wits Sport and Exercise Medicine Professor John Patricios. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Concussion has become one of the biggest problems in sport, and in fact, so much so that I think there was a study or a report that came out recently talking about how athletes, especially footballers, will be suffering from the effects of concussion and head injuries for some years to come, even beyond their careers. There is a whole movie that has come out some years ago, of course, starring Will Smith, that speaks to the effects of the head injuries suffered by NFL players to a point where dementia becomes a thing, and even they just essentially causes them to take their own lives. This is a serious issue that has taken years to address, but it is being addressed now. Can we confidently say that?
Yes, good morning to you and to the viewers. I think the role of this group of 108 co-authors who've researched this issue of sport-related concussion over the last 5 years is to put highlighted aspects of that are in the media into perspective. And certainly one of the aspects we looked at in detail was the potential long-term effects. So it's important to look at what science has to offer and what we know about it, and equally what we don't know, so that we can plan how to research these areas better. But coming out of this consensus conference, which was held in Amsterdam at the end of last year, and the release of these papers last week, we certainly have a lot better perspective of what we know and how we can implement on field those changes which will hopefully protect our athletes moving forward.
When you bring science and facts and research and medical know-how into a money business, that's what sport essentially is. It's a business. It's a billion-dollar business, multi-billion-dollar business. You start to upset a couple of people, and by this I speak of, again, I will reference the NFL, when the research and the expertise was shared by doctors with the NFL that your sport is killing your people. The people that are making you this money, they are dying because of the sport that is making you all of this money. Information was being essentially sanitized, it was being suppressed. People were not being told the effects of what is happening in the NFL until you couldn't hide it anymore. Is it being well received by those in sports, whatever sporting code you guys may be dealing with, be it rugby, football, whichever? Is it being well received by those who are running these sports that, listen, you need to look after your athletes, you need to make sure that these people are taken care of, and that you can't just, oh no, it's okay, it's part of the game, they need to just man up about it? Is it being well received?
Let me put it in this way. The actual big sporting organizations such as the NFL, such as FIFA, World Rugby, International Ice Hockey, the Equestrian Federation, have all sponsored the conference. In other words, they put up money to bring clinicians together. Having said that, all the scientists did this work free of charge. No one was paid, so there's no suggestion that there's any influence from any of the organizations at all. But the reasons that they have an interest in this field are really twofold. One is that if these recurrent concussions are an issue, they need to know about it. But the good news is that actually sport, including from a mental health point of view, is overwhelmingly beneficial at an amateur and professional level. There seem to be some risks to some professional athletes, but overwhelmingly, most athletes suffer fewer mental health issues than those that don't participate in sport. The second reason that it's in their interests, the sporting organizations, to support a process like this is that we've actually come out with tools and guidelines which say to them, this is how your athletes can protect themselves. And the journals, 2 journals, were filled with these papers and suggestions, but let me crystallize a few. The first is that it's possible to prevent sport-related concussion. Now, that can happen with the use of equipment, and there's good evidence from ice hockey in Canada that the use of mouth guards may help. There's evidence from rugby that the use of the right conditioning and what we call neuromuscular exercises, preparing your body and brain for the sport with specific exercises, can help reduce the risk of concussion. Policy change is important, and we've seen that in the tackle situation in rugby. And so there are a number of areas where we can actually prevent concussion. The consensus process has also come out with 5 tools which will help both healthcare professionals and the layperson to recognize concussion and to manage it better. So the one everyone should know about is called the concussion recognition tool, which is freely available on the internet and which every coach and referee and parent should have in her or his back pocket, because it shows you how to recognize concussion and what to do about it in terms of the next steps. And for healthcare professionals who see these patients, there are good guidelines for the sideline called the Sports Concussion Assessment Tool, or the SCAT-6, and the Office Assessment Tool, or the SCOTE-6, which guide you. And then to complement those, there are Return to Learn for those who are in the classroom and Return to Sport strategies, which have been defined. So we're really very hopeful that people who follow these guidelines will be protecting their athletes. And we can then encourage increased participation in sport, including in contact and collision sports.
We can only but hope that we get to that point where sport isn't seen as, essentially the beginning of the end of one's life, and that, it is something that helps with their mental health, as you have mentioned. Professor, we'll leave it there with you. Thank you so much for joining us here on ENCA. That was Wits Sport and Exercise Medicine Professor John Patricios.